Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce A.J. Swanson from Cornerstone Church here in town. He's the senior pastor there. He has been roaming around town now for a few months. He came all the way from Texas just to be here with us, so that's fantastic. But we'll let A.J. introduce himself and tell a little bit about his family and his ministry. A.J.?
Thank you, guys. It is a pleasure to be here. As Stephen was offered me the mic today, I had one of my sayings, and my uncle came up pretty quickly. He said, if you want a pastor to preach an hour-long sermon, give him about 5 hours of prep. If you need 45 minutes, 6 to 7. If you need a 30-minute sermon, give him about 10. If you need him to preach, just give him a mic. So unfortunately, he's given me the mic. So I don't know how much time y'all have today.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, okay. I like it. But I wanted to share a little bit about myself and then share a little bit about my story. So as Steve said, my name is A.J. Swanson. I am a husband to Corey. I have 4 awesome kids. Eldest one is named after Steve. Not really, but after. My eldest is Stephen, and then I have Piper, who's 6, Evangeline, who's 3, and Robbie, who is not even 1 yet. He's got to be 9 months. I'm so happy I was able to remember their ages right there. They move so quick. But I have 4 kids. They're awesome and wonderful. Right now we're living off of Cicero, which in Texas we call Cicero, because we make everything Spanish. And so we're over there right now, and we're currently looking for kind of a forever home. So we want to be in the community, we want to be in Hicksville. I do not view ministry as a stepping stone. I'm not trying to get to the mega church in 10 years. Ministry should be how you pour yourself and life into the community. I'm sure many of you know Jack Teeple, whose kind of role I'm taking over. But Jack has been a cornerstone in this community for forever. I'd say probably 25, 30 years. And I very much hope to take on and continue that legacy. We're not getting rid of Jack. Jack's just came back from a vacation, and it was his first day back in the office this morning, and I was literally dancing as he came back in. I love Jack, and I'm just empowering him to do ministry differently during this season of life. He's retirement age, and he wants to enjoy life a little bit more and not have to do a sermon every week and get to hang out with more people. So I get to empower Jack to do ministry differently, which is awesome. So that's kind of where we're at now. My wife is from the area. She's from Auburn. She was born close to Mishawaka, but she was raised in Auburn from about the age of 2 on. Her dad is Phil Chase, who's a doctor at Parkview Hospital. He's a family practice physician over at Parkview Hospital and has been, all her adult life. So if you know the Chase family, which I feel like I bump into people who know the Chase family all the time, she's one of 10. She's the second oldest of 10. I was the first person to marry into the family. We call ourselves outlaws. You know the difference between an outlaw and an in-law? One is wanted. So we have a wonderful group of outlaws that continue to grow. We were so excited to move up here. Stephen is the oldest grandchild on both sides of the family, both the Swanson and the Chase side. And as of last week, I think number 20 was born. It was either number 20 or 21 of grandchildren. So my kids have playmates coming up the wazoo. So we were very excited to move up here. So why am I here? Why is A.J. Swanson serving in Hicksville, Ohio? And I wanted to share with you a little bit of my testimony, how I got here. I was raised in a Christian home. I was baptized in a little Presbyterian church in Sarasota, Florida, where my father was a deacon, and was raised in the church starting from a very young age. We moved around a lot. My dad was a banker. So right in the 90s, all the state lines started to cross and all the banks started to gobble up each other. And so I think he worked for 5 different banks in the first 10 years of my life. And Dad was just set on kind of climbing the next step. So as one bank was gobbled, they say, hey, now we have 2 managers in one town. We got to fire one of you. So where would you like to go? And he was always like, oh, just send me to the next opportunity. And so we moved around a lot. I went to 4 different elementary schools and 4 different middle schools. So during the most formative years of my life, I learned how to be an extrovert. And so we moved a lot as a kid. And so in 6th grade, I had one of the most life-changing experiences happen to me. We had just moved to Venice, Florida about 1.5 years prior. Honestly, we had not found a church that we could plug into and wanted to be involved at, so church life was very sporadic at that point. And it was a Saturday morning. It's me and my little brother Tommy. I'm sitting at the table. My dad and my brother David. David is a swimmer. So they were at another swim meet on a Saturday. It's just what you do when you live a swim life. And we're sitting there having a Swanson staple, macaroni and cheese and hot dogs. So we're sitting around having macaroni and cheese and hot dogs, and the phone rings. Now this is one of those phones that's still attached to the wall, if you remember those. And Mom goes to pick up the phone. And I remember as a child hearing my mother gasp and then fall to the ground. And we had gotten word that my cousin, who was younger than me, had just had a brain aneurysm on the soccer field. And here one moment, and kind of gone the next. He was being rushed to the ER and they told us to pray. I remember that moment like it was yesterday, y'all, when I was in 6th grade. So we prayed together as a family, and then later that night, after my dad got home, they called us into the bedroom and said that Owen had passed away. The next day, they were in the Midwest at the time. Next day, I was charged as the oldest son of 3 boys to go with my mom to the funeral. My dad could not go, he could not get off work, so I remember getting on a plane, I think it was 3 planes, to get to where we landed in upstate Ohio to drive to Michigan. The last one was a rickety, like 8-passenger plane where you could see the pilots and they're moving this big stump weight, right? You're a large fella, you're over here. And we landed, and I, again, being tasked with taking care of my mom as a 6th grader. I've worked with youth for 13 years. Most of the teenagers I've ever worked with can't point to the moment in their lives where they grew up. And I know the exact moment. It was walking into the church, turning the corner into where the body was, and kind of meeting the family and the line that you go through to see and say goodbyes. And my mother ran out. She couldn't handle it. So I remember chasing my mother down in a parking lot in October and carrying her back into the church and walking through that line and seeing my uncle and my aunt and Owen's older sister, Lindsay. And those eyes are just buried into my eyes forever. To see Lindsay in that much pain, we had grown up together, she was my age. It gutted me. My uncle was a pastor and still is a pastor. Amazing man of God. I hope you all get to meet Mark someday. And he had the tenacity to preach the gospel at his son's funeral. And over 20 people came to know Jesus that night. I was not one of them. I went the exact opposite direction. And that night I vowed to hate a God I no longer believed in. My rebellion as a junior high kid, I was not an outright rebellion. I didn't do things to get mom and dad's attention, to make them mad. I just subverted everything. That's the way I operated. I was your worst nightmare as a youth pastor, because I used to go on the youth retreats to try to deconvert kids and just pretend to be the good little Christian boy when I was at church. I was so mad and so angry. So for about 1.5 years, I was really wrestling with life. I no longer viewed life the same as my friends, because I had encountered death before, but this death not only came across as hard, it came across as bitter. There was a lot of anger. And then we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're now at Charlotte. We're going to a church regularly. A dear man, Jake Tassi, who was a youth pastor there at the time, slowly walked through the gospel with me and slowly began using apologetics to break down barriers that I had put up. And by the grace of God, began to soften my heart. There's something in the South that was very weird. I still look back on that and I'm like, I don't know if this is a good outreach opportunity or not. It was called a judgment house, which is the church's version of a haunted house during Christmas time, right? I don't know if we want to partner together on something later, but it was weird. So I went to this, and the story at the judgment house involved around a tornado that took a town and lives. And so you kind of see happiness, you see destruction, and then it's this revolving story that moves from one theater stage to another in each room, and you visit hell, and you see what happens there. And then when it got to heaven, I thought you would just see the people who had just passed, right, in the tornado. But instead, they had moved the moment of heaven 20 years in the future, where the father who had survived the tornado gets to heaven to be reunited with his son. Y'all, that shook me. You know, when Owen died, there was a finality to it, right? They're never going to see each other again, my Uncle Mark and him. How could a God do that? But if God exists and heaven is real, and Jesus exists and is a God of reconciliation, then this is not it. And my uncle will get to hold his son again. And I gave my life to Jesus that night because of, again, the work of Jake, breaking down barriers over the course of months, but with this angry kid. And in that moment, it became very real. I immediately started volunteering at my church because I had not paid attention in church up until that point. So I was like, well, I don't know any of the stories, at least not for real. So I signed up to volunteer in children's ministry because I figured if you want to learn the church stories, you should probably start with the kids' stories. So I worked in children's ministry from late 7th grade all the way to being a junior or senior in high school. I was the storyteller in the kids' Sunday school class on a regular basis, and then started doing outreach ministry in high school. I am a theater advocate. I love theater. That was if you wanted to find me in high school where I was president of the International Thespian Society at my high school, and I think I did 20-something performances my junior and senior year between all my work with choir and the groups I was in, and then theater. So when I moved here and I heard about the Huber, I got to tour that a couple weeks ago. Y'all, I was giddy for like a week. Meeting Chris over there at the Huber and kind of touring that facility. And I've heard story after story about the man hours that have gone into rebuilding that place. I got to do Stan Applegate's funeral last week and sitting down with his family and then being able to, Stan was in there and he did this and this and this. And I can't wait to go into that space again and kind of, I'll look at the stairs differently. I'll look at the painting on the walls differently because you see the love that goes into this community. And I see that everywhere. I've got to interact with people in this community. I see the love that's poured into it. And one of the things that makes me so excited to be here. And so I was a theater kid. So I thought I would end up being a theater teacher. What draws most theater kids is that we are so uncomfortable in our own shoes that we'd rather be in someone else's, right? There's a lot of brokenness in the theater world. There's a lot of wholeness too, but I know so many of, especially me and my friends, we ran to theater because we weren't comfortable in our own shoes. And so to play a character for a little bit of time gave us a chance to escape, right? It's essentially escapism, especially with some of the Stanislavski kind of method acting stuff that we did. And so I went to college to be a theater teacher. Awesome university, UNC Charlotte, great teacher there, a professor named Matt, who was a theater ed guy. And so my freshman year of college, on a dare from a pastor, he said, serve in a ministry which you feel most uncomfortable with, because that's where you're going to get the chance to grow. So I immediately called up Jake Tassie, who was still in charge of the youth ministry. He was the youth pastor that I had gotten saved under. And I said, Jake, I cannot believe I'm saying this. I cannot believe I'm saying this. Can I help volunteer for like 6 months? He was at the same service. He heard the dare. And he's like, sure, we'll have you. So I'm a college guy. I'm not hanging out with junior high kids. And it was a 6-month process, and I was there for the next 8 years. I outlived Jake. Jake left about a year and a half after to go on the mission field. And then it was me and Liz who were running the show for a couple of years until we hired a new person. And then Liz left, and then we hired my wife. And I was on her hiring committee. And she was in ministry, working with junior high girls. And that's how that love story started. I did not vote for her to get the job when I was on her hiring committee. We worked through that in counseling. We're fine. It tells you how much of a fool I was, right? But we did ministry together, and at some point over the course of it, I said, yeah, I want to marry this one. And so she told me no the first time, and then I slowly wore her down and won her heart, or at least I'm still trying to. We're 12 years in. But it has been a wonderful experience. When I finished my theater degree, because at that point to change it, I would have had to restart everything. And y'all, I'm cheap. I'm not spending that much money on college education if I have to. And so I ended up going to seminary right after, Southern Evangelical Seminary in Charlotte. At that point, I thought I would still be a teacher. I had this much desire to be a pastor, y'all, this much. And so went into teaching. It's 2011, we're looking for work. And of course, it is the middle of a recession. If you remember 2011, I think I put in for like 30 teaching positions in Indiana, Ohio, because we wanted to be close to family. And I got no one calling back, because teachers are not leaving in the middle of a recession. It's not like you can get work elsewhere. So I never got a call. I did apply for one job in Texas where my folks had relocated to. And so I was at their church on a Sunday morning. I was talking to Pastor Jamie at the time. And I said, Jamie, I'd love to get that job down the street. Can you put my name to the top of the list? Right? He knows the guy. And he said, you want to move to Texas? And I said, I don't want to die here, but I'm willing to do ministry here for 5-10 years. And that's what I did. I was there for 5-10 years as the youth and children's director. I got to build a children's and youth ministry from scratch. We were a church plant when we began, and when I left, we were finishing a capital campaign for a new building. And so now, when Cornerstone came up, again, it was one of those God things, you all. I was 6 months away from being ordained within my last denomination. And I saw a job advert at Cornerstone Church. We had just had Robbie, okay? We're like 2 weeks out from having a newborn baby. So I had happened to click on the Ohio side of churchstaffing.com. I only check churchstaffing.com to know what churches I don't want to apply for when we were to eventually try to look up here. Like there's some churches in town that hire a new youth pastor every year. Guess where I'm not applying, right? There's another church in Fort Wayne that the whole staff left except for the lead pastor at one point. Guess where I'm not applying, right? So it was more to that, and I happened to just click it on a whim, and Cornerstone was right there, and it said Hicksville, and I said, where's Hicksville? I'm like, oh, it's literally on the same road that my wife grew up in Auburn. It's 2 turns out of my church parking lot to her house. And so I brought the advert down to my wife, and I said, hey, look at this, fits me to a T. She looked at me and said, if you move me, I will kill you. I haven't slept or anything. I said, let's just pray on it. Let's pray about it for a week. So we prayed about it for the weekend, and Monday morning I put in, and I said, worst case scenario, right, is that they call me back, right? Because my church in Texas was awesome. I love my pastor. My elders there were rock solid. I'm not leaving greener pastures, that's for sure. I mean, I'm not leaving for greener pastures. I had a great church there. And then the Lord opened doors here. You know, I came from a Presbyterian background. Unbeknownst to me, half my church is Presbyterian because they merged with the Presbyterian church. So we kind of say some of the same words and speak the same language. So it was like, whoa, that's kind of weird. And then the number of links that we have between here and my family in Auburn. were phenomenal. And then, I mean, meeting Jack, what a blessing. I want a heart for ministry like Jack. So I never would have known to ask the Lord for a position like this, where I have the former lead pastor who's been there in town for 25 years, be able to walk you through who everyone is in town and how to love this town best. I couldn't have asked for this as a pastor. Most pastors are leaving a rough situation or are going to a rough situation and need to do triage. That was not the case at Cornerstone. It was a really super healthy church with a super healthy senior pastor who's one of the most humble guys I've ever met. And now I get to do ministry with him. We're just in different roles. Me and Jack have tons of similarities. Jack has 3 boys. I'm one of 3 boys. We actually have the same birthday. We have the same weird colored marble-shaped eyes. Like, our preaching styles are very similar. It's weird. We're already only 3 months in, and I feel like there are times where we're finishing each other's sentences. But it's a wonderful relationship. And now we're here in Hicksville, and I'm so excited to get to know everyone in this room. I'm excited to do life with you, even if it is just bumping into you occasionally. I saw Pat here, and I'm like, I know her. I got insurance with her a couple weeks ago. It was great. Your son's name's Paul, right?
Oh my goodness.
I got that right.
You did.
Okay, good. So I'm getting to know names and faces, and I love it. I saw Sue here. Honestly, Sue, I didn't recognize you because I've only seen you with the mask on. So I was like, I know half that face. I don't know the whole face though. But I was having prayer with Tom this morning, her husband. So it's been a pleasure to kind of get to know people in the community. I look forward to getting to know you all. I am not shy. 4 middle schools in 3 years did that to me. It kicked out the introvert, even though I would still rather prefer just a lemonade and a book if I need time to recharge. But feel free to, if you see me on the side of the road, well, if you see me on the side of the road, stop, okay? There's a parable about that. But if you see me on the side of the road, switch by, make sure I'm okay. But feel free to say hi, introduce yourself to me. If you want to grab lunch or coffee, I'm always down for that, especially if you're paying. But I'll pay too, I'll chip in, we can go Dutch. But I'd love to get to know you all, get to see you as faces and new faces and really extended family. So thank you for having me, Steve, thank you for inviting me. Am I supposed to open it up for questions, or do I sneak away?
There's 10 minutes of grilling.
10 minutes of grilling, that's okay. I've gone through Presbyterian ordination exams. You've got nothing on that. It's like a Jedi council all around me asking theology questions. It's terrifying.
Is there any questions?
Well, since you said he needs grilled, Steve,
Yeah.
what questions did they ask you just interviewing that they should have, did they?
Well, I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, and up until this year, they should have asked why I'm a glutton for punishment. It's been a long, long lifetime of suffering, except for 2 years. But I'm speaking to, I'm sure, Browns fans too, and I feel you. I feel you. Yes?
Where at in Texas were you?
I was in Dallas, Dallas area. The Metroplex is huge. So I was in Frisco, which was one of the fastest growing communities in the country up until, I think McKinney topped us this year. But for like 10 years in a row, we were a fastest growing community. It went from like 40,000 to 250,000, and I mean, less than 20 years. It's crazy. I love walking around town, and there's like trees that have been here for 100 years. In Texas, that was not the case. They were all under 10, 15 years old, and the wind had blown the majority of them down, and they needed to be replanted. But Frisco, so it goes Dallas, Plano, Frisco, or Dallas, Walker, Texas Ranger, Frisco. So.
Is this the smallest town you've been?
Oh, by far. So, I mean, my neighborhood, I didn't live in Frisco. Honestly, it was just too expensive for us. So I lived in what was considered Frisco's ugly stepsister, which is Little Elm, which was this beachfront community on a man-made lake. I loved it. But that town, I think we had 10,000 people in my neighborhood. And so you're a little bit smarter than my neighborhood, or Hicksville is. So it's new for me. But it's wonderful. I feel like I'm in Act 1 of a Disney movie. Every day I wake up and I walk out onto the farm on Cicero and I see the sunrise. I'm like, this ain't Kansas anymore, or maybe it is more of Kansas than I'm used to, but it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
So is there a community Good Friday service?
We're doing Monday, Thursday, so that's the history with this service, with this church, so we'll do a Monday, Thursday service this Thursday. There's not a community one this year.
Is there anybody having a Good Friday service that's actual?
Not that I know of, Pat, it's just with the COVID and stuff, everybody's so, afraid whether it would fall out or not. And AJ and I have already talked about it, we're gonna be after it for
Yeah.
next year for sure.
The beauty of a community like this is that I got awesome other pastors in the area that I get to work with on a regular basis. So I've gotten to know so many of you guys, the other pastors in the area, and it's honestly, it's a breath of fresh air. There was a church pretty much on every corner in Texas, right? Like that's, in many regards, it's the buckle of the Bible Belt. But there's a good group of pastors here that I've already gotten to know, and we're going to be doing stuff together in the future, which is super exciting. Do I say go blue? Go blue.
Thank you, AJ. Appreciate you sharing your ministry with us today, and welcome to the Hicksville community.
Thanks, man.